All right, it's 5 past, so why don't we go ahead and begin this morning. Well, first of all, thanks for joining. I know it's the first session, so there's still a lot of people coming in, and you had to get here early. So today we're going to talk about Drupal and Alexa integration, talk about just conceptually as well as some technical details. I like to have interactive sessions, so feel free to raise your hand throughout the entire session for any questions you have, and I'll ask you to ask your question when there's a natural break, and we'll also take 15 minutes at the end for questions as well. So first off, how many people here have an Amazon Alexa device? So the majority of folks in the room. Any other virtual assistant devices? Google Homes? Yeah. Any others outside of those two? Yeah, so those are probably the two biggest ones in the market today. So we want to talk about, how do we look at Drupal really as the single source of truth for content and use other mechanisms such as virtual assistants to, sorry.
Speak up just a little bit.
All right, is this better?
Yeah.
All right,
yeah,
sorry.
Thank you.
All right, so we're going to talk a little bit more about, how do we look at Drupal as a single source of truth for content? So really looking at that code model beyond just the website itself, and how do we specifically apply it to Alexa? So first off, some real-world examples. Most of you probably heard about the deal that Amazon had with Marriott back in June that was announced, where they're looking to place an Amazon device in every single hotel room, and they're starting to pilot this in specific locations. And essentially using that as a concierge where you can ask questions, order items from dinner for yourself to anything else that you need from the hotel. And even last night, there was announcements I saw for St. Louis University, where they're actually putting in a Amazon Echo device in every single dorm room. That's 23,000 different dorm rooms that they're equipping with Echo devices. So there's clearly a lot of questions still out in there in terms of privacy and whether it's completely secure or not. But looking at more of the positive side of how can we take advantage of these devices that are out there today? How can we better get content out to the end users? So I'm not big on slides, so I'm going to upload the slide deck that we have, but I want to talk through some of the different integration points that you consider, as well as walk through some examples out there. So the first thing what we want to look at when we're trying to make content available to everything is really how is the content stored within the system? What are some considerations we should have for content so that it really is something that we can make available in an omni-channel environment, where so it's available for consumption both on the web, via chatbots, via virtual assistants, via cognitive search solutions, and everything out there. In this case, since we're honing in on more of the virtual assistant scenario, I want to talk a little bit about FAQs, because that's really the natural place for us to look at for any kind of conversational virtual assistant. What I have on the screen here is just an example that we're working on for the Children's Inn here at NIH, where we're building a conversational chatbot to help parents and those that are coming to stay at the inn, those who are coming to stay at the inn, to ask questions of this chatbot that we have for any information they need about their stay here, whether it's where can their child go get snacks, or what community services are available, to more harder questions about their actual services that are being provided at NIH. So when we're looking at conversational chatbots or virtual assistants, we want to know several things. One, we want to know what is their intent. What are they specifically trying to ask? How are they trying to ask it? So what are the sample utterances? There's multiple ways to ask the same question. We want people to be cognizant of that and take all those into consideration. And then how do we make sure that the content that they get back is something that they can consume in those multiple channels? So in this example here, we have all of this stored within the Drupal system. So we have the primary question that's displayed, especially from a content editor perspective, when you're looking in Drupal to try to find out what piece of content I'm editing. However, we have these alternate questions. So in this case, how do I get around without using Route 495? Obviously, there's a lot of traffic on 495, and you'd want to avoid that. In this case, we want to have them ask questions as, let's say, how do I avoid the Beltway as an alternative to 495? I don't want to drive in 495. How do I get around without using 495? So different examples here. All these examples are not the end-all be-all of the only scenarios you have to use word for word, and that's where the AI platform comes into play. So What happens here is either Amazon Alexa or any of the AI platforms that are out there will take these as samples, and as more users start using the system, the level of confidence for different types of utterances will also increase. So if I ask a question that isn't here, let's say I ask a question here is when is rush hour, but I don't say here, let's say, when are the best hours to avoid 495. But that could be something that I can start training the chatbot based on the interactions that users have, or I can add that in based on, let's say, analytics I gather on their site and continue to build upon these skill sets. But I need that simple sit to begin with for the utterances themselves. Questions thus far? All right. So in addition to that, we want to be able to surface content in multiple fashions. In this way, we determine that it's best. And I'm sorry, is the screen big enough for everyone? Make it a little bit bigger.
Make it bigger.
All right. All right. So in this case, we decide we also want to capture content individually for the chatbot or Alexa integration, plus for the web content itself. So in this case, I have the short answer for chatbot versus a longer answer for the web. You know, the key to keep in mind for any kind of conversational tool set out there, whether it's chatbot on the web or Alexa, is really you have only a short period of time for the attention span of a person as they're having conversation versus when you display content on the site where you can have a little bit more leeway in terms of the type of content you display, the number of links, and the content that you push out to them. So in this case, we're showing them just directly, you know, what is the time to avoid find 5 as a link, as well as the web answer here, which has additional information around, you know, what is the 495, also called the capital byway. So just additional knowledge they may want to have. However, if we are going to take this and actually make it available to Alexa as well, something to also avoid are links like the one we see here, the 95 road conditions. That's not going to be meaningful if I'm hearing in a voice context. The same thing goes for, let's say, the read more links that you have on a page for FAQs. So oftentimes what you want to do is now you want to embed those into the text itself. So I were to rephrase here where I can say rush hour is generally 6 a.m. to 4 p.m., 4 to 7 p.m., and have that underlined with a link out to road conditions for that time as well. Or something where it's a little bit more natural to get to that information when you visually see it. All right. So in this case, again, we're capturing all this information here, and we also allow for them to ask those same questions on a chatbot on the website. Now, what we're more interested in here is more of the skills itself on the back end. That's a project that's in progress. So another project that we have that we were looking at is the use for HHS, Health and Human Services, and some of the different areas that they would be interested in making information available. For example, for the opioids crisis, or for information about HIPAA and high tech. So information that they can ask via chatbot, as well as on the web, as well as, let's say, texting hs.gov or asking Alexa itself. So part of what we would want to look at there is also integrating the feed out of Drupal, which we would take. So come on in if you want to. All right, sorry. I know it's the beginning of the conference, so there's a lot of people coming in and out. All right, so what we'd want to ultimately do is integrate this with the developer environment within Amazon. So the first step that we want to do is, one, all this data that's within Drupal, how do we get that out of Drupal? So how many people here are familiar with the Drupal web services, especially those that are built into Drupal 8? Has anyone made use of them so far? So a few hands in the room. So Drupal 8 has the web services module built into core. And what that allows us to do is to create JSON feeds that now allow this information to be consumed by any kind of source. So this same chatbot content that I have, if I go to our views, I'm able to expose the information that I specifically want here. So the title, the alternative questions, and the short answer. Notice that we're only interested in the short answer in this case for virtual assistants versus the longer answer on the web. And publish this to a JSON feed. So this would ultimately be able to be consumed by any type of indexing service for search as well as any kind of cognitive service for chatbot or Alexa. Now, Alexa has a specific JSON format you need to make available. For that, there is a Drupal module out there. So you can also take this and you can create a Drupal module that will specifically map these fields for Amazon Alexa. But I'm going to come back to that. I just want to show you the Alexa interface first in terms of what information do they expect to capture. So within Amazon Alexa, who here has tried actually creating an Amazon skill? Is this something new for folks, or has anyone tried it yet? So just a handful of folks. So they make it pretty simplistic. They give you a starter kit. And as we mentioned, there's several things that we want to be able to capture. We want to know what is the intent of the user and the question that they're asking. They want to know what is the sample utterance, so what are different ways they can ask the question and determine what is the user's intent. And then ultimately, what is the answer that we want to surface to that user. So for Alexa, what you have to define is what are those utterances and the intents. So here's an example when we're talking about our HHS opioid crisis. So in this case, our intent here is to surface information about opioids. What is an opioid? The different questions I can ask are generally, what is an opioid? Tell me about opioids. What are opioids? And please tell me what an opioid is. So different examples here of different ways I can approach that question. You can also capture variables here. So for example, if I say, where can I find a clinic in Baltimore? Where can I find a clinic in Washington, D.C.? That city can also be a variable here that we define and send along to the backend so that I know that based on that variable, what information I want to send back to the end user and how do I want to respond. So it's a very simple interface here on the web that you can use to design that. For the more technical users, there is the JSON editor. So all this information is once again made available via JSON, since that's more of the universal format that we're using for surfacing data. So this same information can be drag and dropped from any of the Alexa apps that are out there for Drupal into Amazon developer portal to train the chatbot or train the virtual assistant in telling you what exactly you should look out for. This is the only piece that's manual that I know of right now. So I'm looking into ways to automate this process, but there is no natural bridge between what we define in Drupal and having it automatically update here in terms of the intents itself. So that is a part that you have to manually maintain. But beyond that, what we then have to do is figure out based on what was asked. So let's say if I ask Alexa, what is an opioid? I now know that the intent of the user is related to this opioid intent that we have in Alexa. And that's what's going to be sent to the backend. Now, there's several ways for us to look at how we're going to capture that information from the backend. One is dynamically connecting to Drupal. Again, if that's our one source of truth, we want to be able to always query Drupal for that information in real time. The only challenge I see in that is that Drupal is not always a high-performance platform when it comes to dynamic calls. It's meant for using a lot of different caching mechanisms that are out there. So if it's something that's readily available via JSON that's cached, it's great. But if you're going to be making a lot of calls to the backend, it tends to be a little bit more slow in response. So that's something that you have to make sure you account for in scaling the environment. So one option is to use that using the Alexa Drupal app that's out there today for Drupal. So this is a contribute module that's out there. Dries has actually used this for one of his keynotes in the past. And if you look up his blog, you'll see a cookbook application that was built out there. So it's something that's been used somewhat since 2016. Essentially, it's a framework for you to use to define how exactly Drupal responds back. So that JSON feed that we looked at. And you can then customize this and write the technical code behind the scenes for it. But this would mean that every single time the Amazon device is used, that query would be made against Drupal. The second option for us to consider, especially if we're looking at making the content available via multiple platforms. So the idea being that I want to be able to service this information to Alexa, and if Google Home allows me to build these skills in the future, I want to be able to do the same thing there. I want to be able to do it for, let's say, in a chatbot that I build online so that I got exactly the same responses. I want to, let's say, build a service where I can text the website and get responses that way as well. So having that ability to build out multiple avenues to get that same bit of information out there. In this case, this Alexa contribute module, as well as Amazon Alexa, is doing a great job to simplify it, but you may be looking for a more complex solution. So what we had looked at for that scenario, and that's what we had used for the HTTPS scenario, is what you can do for the Amazon configuration here for the endpoints is rather than point it to HTTPS, which we point to Drupal, you can also use Lambda. So we can use Amazon Lambda to then query your actual AI platform in the backend. So in our case, we use Amazon or the Booz Allen DeckC solution, which really relies on Raza.ai. So Raza is a similar solution, let's say, to Watson or some of the other AI platforms, but it is open source, so it's much easier to use and augment within the backend. So we'll talk a little bit more about DeckC at the end of it. DeckC, and I'll bring that up as well. So that's just part of what we've done to help package some of the information. But the key here is that this can still use all open source technologies. So something like Raza.ai, you can have that consume all of that information and have that be a single source that is now taking the information from Drupal, manipulating it so it can be made available to your chatbot online or to Alexa or to, let's say, even Google Home in the future. So in this scenario, I do have one of my echoes here. And if I ask the question of an opioid, if all goes well with live demos as they always do, I can ask Alexa, what is an opioid?
Opioids are narcotics that act on opioid receptors to produce morphine-like effects.
So all it is, query the backend here. So it went through here, it determined that my intent was the opioid, and based on that, I sent it to the Lambda skill that we have on the backend, which then queried the JSON that we've already cached with Drupal for that specific bit of information. So that way there's no stress on the back end. Lambda's handling all the calls, and Lambda tends to be very flexible in terms of how many calls you can make, and quite cheap as well. And that same interface is what is used for the chatbot that we also built for this demo, which I don't have up and running here, but that same backend was being used for the same information or same question being answered in the same exact manner. And the positive piece of that is, instead of having different analytics for all these different tools, now you're also centralizing that information. So whether that question is asked in a verbal format in one of these virtual assistants like Alexa, being asked on the website, or any other venue that you have, you can centrally collect that information and help one tool benefit from the information that's gathered for the other. Questions so far? All right, so let me go back to the tool that I mentioned as well, which was DeckC. DeckC is a tool that really we built out for Booz Allen. And it's a completely open source tool that we offer. So built on open source tools that are out there today as well. We use Raza.ai, but we can plug into any other open source tool out there as well, including the Amazon tool sets that have just been released, including Watson. In fact, we actually beat out Watson in answering some questions when we were responding to a challenge. So this platform is built out there for us to help facilitate that information across multiple platforms, as well as provide cognitive search solutions. So the same way that we want to be able to search information via conversational solutions, we also want to be able to have search take advantage of the same kind of analytics we have, same kind of mechanisms we have to make sure we understand what is the true intent of the user when they're performing a search, and how can we get that information out to the user. So the use cases that we looked at so far that we've been talking about is more of the conversational interface for chatbot. So this is the example of what we just looked at for HHS. In this case, having that chatbot that is available on the web that can result in that faster access to the same information that we're looking at there regarding opioids. And the children's in that we just looked at a few minutes ago, where again, this question can be asked of any of the parents or the folks that are coming to the children's in so that their children can get treatment here on campus, and allow them to have fax access to these questions. In this case, we're primarily looking at the chatbot, but since Marriott is putting echoes in every room, and that's really direction, this can easily be extended out to virtual assistants in the voice format as well. And what we've mostly been focusing in on so far has been that Amazon Echo skill. So that's really where we can take that same information that we've built out in Drupal and make that available in Alexa, just with a small bit of additional work, either using that configured module that's offered for Drupal if you're just looking for simple solutions, or again, use that type of DeckC or Browse.ai platform that unifies that and has the same mechanism across all different platforms that we have today, as well as those that will be created tomorrow.
So, for all the voice enabled ones, can you use different languages as well?
So the question was, could you use different languages for the voice platforms? And that does depend on the voice device itself, correct? So if it can accommodate different languages, which is in the roadmap for Amazon, then yes, you can have same kind of thing where in Drupal you can use the multilingual plugins with Drupal 8 that is part of core, and you can manage that content. In the same way, you can make sure that that intent based on another variable, what language was the actual question asked in, we respond back with that same language from the information captured in Drupal.
So you're saying it will depend on the device you're using?
Yes. So
I think in most cases on our websites or our Drupal, we have used multilingual content already. So that would be the limitation then.
Correct. So the limitation would be the platform that you're using. So if you're talking about just the website itself and chatbot, then that's very easy to say because that's all hardware that you control or software that you control. So you can take a look at, let's say, one of the chatbots here based on whatever page that they're on, whether it's a Spanish speaking, whether it's English speaking, or any others that you support, the response can be made on the same language. When we're talking about the actual voice conversational tools, that's where it really depends on the hardware and the company that we're now working through. So for Amazon, I know it's very well on their roadmap. They're looking to expand there, so as soon as they have that available for different languages, then you can take advantage of the same compatibility. Any other questions?
What's the best link for DeckC?
Less link for DeckC? I don't think I have a public, but I do have, if you come to our booth at the end of the exhibit hall, I do have a fact sheet that I can distribute regarding that. And you can certainly reach out to me for details.
But it is open source.
It is open source. Other questions?
All these require going outside, having an open network connection, right?
So yes, if you're looking at connecting to an Amazon device or something else, then obviously going over the internet. However, if you're looking for something where that you want in a closed network, you can still host something like DeckC, where you have everything hosted in-house, and you don't rely on an external tool to do any kind of translation there or determination of what the user's intent is. For example, in DeckC, and I do have other slide decks that go into much more detail there for that solution if you're interested. But if you build out, let's say, the Browse.ai platform, now you own the service where that sits on. You own all the information that it is hosting as well. And we've used that to even build out tier 1 help support for, let's say, a ServiceNow solution. So you have your help support that's completely in-house, and that's the first place you go for asking questions at tier 1 support for that environment. So that can certainly be done, but you can't connect to any of these external devices in that case.
For your, you just mentioned tier 1 help support. Did you build that using just the regular Alexa skills, or did you use Alexa for Business?
So that one is, we don't have the voice interface for that yet, but that is more of the DeckC solution for the chatbot. But since that's, again, using the same just bits of information, that can still be built out using just the regular Alexa tool set. Alexa for Business can certainly be used for some of that functionality. I think that allows more for the enterprise solution for your business itself, making phone calls and so forth. But that's not required for just basic questions and answers. That does bring me to just the general QA. So if there's any other questions, feel free to jump. Go ahead.
So the DeckC has synonyms and natural language built in, so it's not just simple.
That's correct. And it is a platform that can plug into any other solutions that are out there as well. So really we're looking at a microservices type architecture, right? So we can use, in this case when we're talking about DeckC, we can use that for more of just search and cognitive search. We can use that for recommendations engine. We can plug into some of the different synonyms and tools out there as well, or use some of the pre-built ones that we have within the system today. Other questions?
share the status of the Alexa module? Because I know it has a security.
Yeah, well, a lot of the AAA modules are still stuck in that queue because of the new approval process. I've looked at it. I haven't seen any particular issues with it. I know that it's used, but again, it's not as widely quite yet. But it's certainly ready for use if you need to go down that path. I've not done any security scans of it independently, though, to certainly say definitively that that's ready from that perspective. Yeah, but it is pretty simplistic. All it does is the same API calls you would make against the Amazon Alexa. It just has some that prepackaged for you. Other questions?
Raza module, how do you spell that?
I'll bring it up. It's raza.ai. And this is just one example of many, but this is a great open source tool that you can use if you're looking to build your own AI platform. And again, if you're interested in pure Alexa integration, it's probably overkill for you to implement this. This is really if you want to own the AI platform, train it yourself, and potentially use it for other interfaces like chatbot, or let's say if Google Home makes that type of functionality available in the future.
So I have another question. So in terms of chat boxes, I personally find them annoying. Do you have any data on that on government websites? And how, I mean, I know you're working with HHS already.
Right.
But do you have like more of the negative feedback or the positive feedback? How does that really work with the users?
Right. I don't have the data on hand, but we do have data that we've captured for that. Most of the time, it's been positive feedback because it's not something that's forced on you. It's something that we minimize and allow you to ask questions. It's not something that is the only method to find the information. So, for example, in this case, for the Children's In website that we have, you can go through and actually click through and actually find a question for yourself, or you can ask the question of the chatbot. Now, new site that is not quite launched yet, so I can't show here, is rec.gov. So that's a great example of the use of the chatbot. We're rebuilding the current recreation website where you get to reserve campsites throughout the nation for various parks that are out there. And one of the methods you can use for that is that you can perform a search on the site for what you're looking for, or you can ask chatbot. And the chatbot also picks up on, let's say, your location, or if you've already done previous searches, and looks at the intent and the context of the questions that you're asking to try to get that information more quickly to you, rather than making just generic responses to the questions that you're asking. But if you're interested, you reach out to me and I'll get you some specific statistics.
I would love to see some data.
Sure.
Just because it's my personal opinion.
So in this case, you could have the Alexa or the Echo at the children's end, so someone can utter something and get the answer, or they can type it in.
Exactly, that's the intent. So you have the same information available via multiple channels. I can go to the website.
If I'm at home and I'm using my Echo, and I say, what is an opioid? It's not going to serve up the answer that you guys have here, because that's separate.
Well, yes and no. So you can publish them publicly. So, for example, the opioid question is a developer tool because I've not published that. It's not something that's available publicly yet. But you can add it like any other skill to your Amazon devices, whether it's the Echo or Show or any others. So in this case, as soon as I say, is it still on? No, I just turned it off. If I ask specifically HHS info or add that skill, then it will always go back to that. In the same way I can say Children's In here, I can say Alexa, ask Children's In, and go through the question that I specifically want, and it can go back to the same endpoint that they have.
So it's not like a general question where I ask what it is and everyone has a knowledge base. It's only with HHS, right? Is that
So
a knowledge base database? I mean, but anyone could go in and put answers, right?
well, we've trained it specifically ourselves for each one of these skills. So the way it works for any of these Amazon Alexa skills is that you have to determine when this specific intent is determine based on their utterance what they've asked specifically, where do I send them for that information. So if it's information that I want to curate and I want to own 100%, so let's say HHS information that I trust, or let's say children's in, it's limited to only my database. But I could very well train that database to gather information from external sources as well. So just like, let's say, a search results where I can go to Google and search the whole internet, or I can go search to a specific site, I can train the chatbot or the AI platform the same way. So that backend could pull data from multiple sources or just my own. Does that make sense?
But it will quote you, right? Because what if I got somebody that's unreliable, I ask?
Well, I determined who's actually in that database,
okay.
right? So I could, for example, for HHS, I could say, I want NIH data, I want CDC, I want HHS proper, but I don't want a small site that's a nonprofit that I don't know or approve of. But this nonprofit I have an agreement with, let's say. So I can select what information I show on there, just the same way that I could, let's say if I on my website, my search results pages, I can select who's part of that search results page. So it's the same kind of mechanism there.
Did you say you have to have an agreement with them?
No, in that case, all I was stating is that if I wanted to expand the information here from what I'm pulling the information from, let's say if it's not just my Drupal website, I'm trying to pull from multiple sources, I would assume that you have some agreement with them, especially if you're government agencies, to make sure you're curating the content properly and that it's something that we approve of. You don't have to do that, of course, but it really depends on how reliable you believe their data is.
So just touching on that, are those data sources always in this FAQ format, or is it kind of question and answer? Is it always that way?
So that's a great question. We focus on FAQ because that's the easiest use case to be able to understand where we're trying to take a look at this concept. But another good example would be something like the flash briefings you get on Alexa. So flash briefing, if everyone is not familiar with it, I can ask it in the morning for, let's say, tell me about the latest news. And the equivalent to that would be, let's say, if I go to my blog roll on this site, I can see the titles for the, let's say, top 5 blogs. And I can ask them specifically, okay, tell me about this specific, when it will pull up that article page or news release and read through it for me. So it doesn't have to be an FAQ. I can look at formatting or pulling in content from any of the other types of content I have within my site. But the important thing there is make sure that it's easy to consume verbally in this scenario. Is it in small bits that I can actually quickly navigate to the larger bit of information that I want to read through, let's say press release, versus having it read through 10 minutes of information for me to actually find what I want.
So I want to piggyback on the other question about sharing content database with like various sub-agencies.
Sure.
HHS. So if HHS hypothetically implements what they probably did already, hypothetically, could you share the implementation with the rest of sub-HHS? Or, so this is, I'm trying to kind of see in the future where there would all be everybody's cloud-based and we could just pick at each other's whatever things we have on Drupal to implement without having to redo the entire work from the get-go.
So I'll caveat this with two things first. One, as a contractor, I can't specifically tell you what the government will or won't do. And this is not live yet for HHS, it's just a demo we did for them. With that in mind, I mean, as part of an open source community like Drupal, we always want to share content. We want to share code. So I would love to see whoever builds out these solutions be able to share them so that other agencies or operating divisions don't have to duplicate work. For HHS, an example, for Drupal 7 content, we already published our content types quite some time ago for the standard, let's say, article, news release, or any of the blog posts, anything that would commonly be used against in any of their Drupal 7 site for government agencies. I can imagine the same kind of work being done here to come up with common code bases that could be shared across operating divisions within HHS or across different agencies. Go ahead. I'll come back to you.
So I'm just trying to understand how this works in terms of the practical aspects of this. In terms of the training that you mentioned, the AI aspect of this, the outcome of that is essentially trying to get, somebody asks a question, the output is always what you've kind of fed it.
Yes,
They refine
but
that output.
what is refined is not the output so much as understanding the input. So I have 4 examples here of utterances, right? But depends, let's say if I ask something that's completely not on here but just mentions the word opioid and I have nothing else here trained for it, it's probably going to be confident that it's related to what I've trained there. But since I have 20 other items here for opioids, if I don't ask something specifically and doesn't know, the confidence level goes down. So really, every response has a confidence level between 0 and 100%. And you have to train that to make sure that it understands what exactly those relationships are. As far as the responses themselves, then that's no longer training of this process, but that's just general machine learning and AI. So you could very well say that based on search results or pages that continue to evolve, I want to evolve the answers, and you have to come up with an algorithm for that. But that's outside the scope of really training this chatbot. That's more of training that backend database and making that data something that's continuing to evolve and grow. Does that make sense? So it certainly can be done, but that's a completely different discussion around how you use machine learning and AI to do that.
Can you get like some stats on the questions people are asking?
Exactly. So you can do one of 2 methods. One is, let's say, if you're using Raza.ai or Alexa, you can always see what questions are being asked, what responses are being given. If you, let's say, even if you open your own Alexa app, you can see what question did I ask and what response did I get. If I go to my app, I can say, did I get the right response or not? That feedback is going back to Amazon or the developer and telling them, you didn't give me the right response or you did. And I can use that to then train the backends or take that question I asked and add it to my backend so that now I know 100% whenever you ask that, that's going to come up as well. So that's one method. Another is using something like Google Analytics, if it's the web-based, not the verbal, to, again, look at what's being asked on chatbot or what's being searched and use that all to centrally train how I'm surfacing that information.
So as competition becomes greater, and thinking about the notion that you said about the news, tell me about the news, tell me what happened with, Michael Cohen today.
Right.
How can we be assured of our information surfacing to the top? As thinking about health information, for example. At NIH, we don't have to see the evidence-based answer as opposed to somebody else's. What are the tricks of the trade for that sort of competition? Standard, taxonomy, keyword research, that type of thing, or?
Yeah, so there's 2 aspects to it. You have tools and platforms that you can train, like Alexa. We can build our own skills, so it can make sure that the right information that we are creating is being made to the public and then market that skill that you're building, right? So that's one method that's very clean. The other is something like Siri, Google Home. We don't control what information they surface, but it's really no different than what Google has been doing for a long time now or what Yahoo has been doing for search. So the same kind of concepts still apply. Make small chunks of information that can be consumed. Make sure you have short descriptions as well as long ones. Have proper taxonomy, have proper keywords there. So the same methods that you typically use for search engine optimization and making sure that information is made available via searches, via social media posting and sharing, those same things can be taken advantage of there.
Kind of following up on that, my question is, so Alexa does a lot of email marketing to Alexa users, right? Here's the most popular thing this week or what have you. What are HHS's plans in terms of marketing the skill so that people actually know to ask HHS this information? Because, WebMD is out there on Alexa, and it's pretty easy to ask WebMD this. It's more popular. I think all of us know what HHS is, but imagine people outside of the
who would ask HHS info about opioids, right? I completely understand. So that was just a quick prototype that we did to show this capability. That's not public yet, so that's something that I have to defer to my colleagues within HHS to think about what is their roadmap for actually putting something like this out in the public. And as we do that for anything from publishing a new website to making a skill available, there clearly has to be a marketing campaign around it to make sure we're hitting the right audiences. And both talk to that on the current websites as well as perhaps the email distributions that they have, get that out there. And it really also depends on who's their audience. For the emails, let's say are we targeting the doctors for this information? Are we targeting the potential patients? Are we targeting family members for opioids? And who are the groups we reach out to? Do we go out to the support groups and talk to them. If it's more about the family members, who are the specific areas, and then go through the standard marketing campaigns for those. Does that sort of answer your question?
Yeah.
Last question?
Is there an analytics tie-in anywhere in this? Like, how can you figure out how many queries were asked or answered, that type of thing?
Yes. So on the back end, let's say for Raza.ai, it gives you those queries itself that have been performed. I believe Alexa has the same exact capability. So you can see what exactly the history, what was asked, what was the answer given, and what was the confidence level, which is really important for us in this case. If it's something like a web chatbot, you can also tie it into something like Google Google Analytics as well. Use their Google Tag Manager, use anything else to just typically look at what's being asked on the website and what's being responded back to. And then are they then, let's say, click on the link there to go to the page? Were they happy with the response or not? And of course, outside of that, there's always the feedback mechanisms that are built into, let's say, Alexa tools, where you can go on your phone and say this was the right or wrong answer. Or same thing on websites, where you can complete those kind of feedback forms as well. All right, I think we're at time, but thank you all for joining me today. And of course, if you have any follow-up questions, feel free to reach out to me. I'll be at our Booz Allen booth all week today. It's right at the end of the conference hall at table 31. Thank you.